Hi, my name is Rhoda Arnold. From the start, I felt something different about this election. When Kamala Harris stepped into the race, I knew right away that I was going to back her. She represented the values I believed in, the future I wanted to see for America. I couldn't quite explain it to anyone who asked. It was a feeling, a certainty, that she was the leader we needed right now. Deep down, I held some strong opinions about Donald Trump. There was a frustration that I kept mostly to myself, feelings I didn't want to get into with anyone. Sometimes, I'd start to talk about it with friends but then pull back. It just felt easier to keep my reasons close. That didn't stop some of my friends from trying to change my mind. On more than one occasion, over coffee or during phone calls, they'd tell me to reconsider. They'd say things like, "You really think Harris can make a difference?" Or, "Don't you think we need stability, even if Trump isn't perfect?" But I would just smile and nod, letting them finish, waiting for my turn to respond. In the days leading up to the election, my mind was made up. Every time I saw Kamala Harris on television, addressing crowds with confidence, I felt that same spark of belief. The morning of Election Day felt different. As I cast my ballot, I felt a sense of finality wash over me. It was done. I'd made my choice. I walked out of the polling station with a pride and anxiety. Pride, because I had done what I believed was right. Anxiety, because now it was out of my hands, left to the will of millions of others who, like me, had cast their own hopes and fears onto that little piece of paper. That night, after a long day, I finally climbed into bed, hoping to drift off into a peaceful sleep. But as I lay there staring at the ceiling, a strange feeling crept over me. It was subtle at first, just a prickling at the back of my neck, like someone's eyes were fixed on me. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing, just the result of a long, emotional day. I rolled over, pulling the covers tightly around me, but the feeling lingered. It was as if a presence filled the room, watching, waiting. My heart began to beat a little faster. I knew it sounded ridiculous, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't convince myself to relax. Finally, I sat up and took a deep breath. Whenever I felt uneasy, I'd turn to prayer, and tonight, it felt like the only thing that might calm me. I reached for my Bible on the nightstand, clutching it close as I closed my eyes and began to pray. As I continued to pray, my eyes closed tightly, I suddenly sensed an intense brightness behind my eyelids, like someone had turned on a powerful light right in front of me. Startled, I opened my eyes, but instead of seeing my bedroom, I was surrounded by a brilliant, almost blinding light that filled my vision. My breath caught, and for a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't think, just awe and a strange calm overtook me. When the light softened, I realized I was standing in a vast room, elegant and familiar, with high ceilings, stately walls, and a deep sense of history in every corner. I recognized it instantly, the White House. But I wasn't a visitor or an outsider looking in. Somehow, I was right in the middle of it all, surrounded by people who seemed to belong there. They wore sharp suits and carried a presence of authority. They looked like officials, decision-makers, the very people responsible for the choices that shaped the nation. I looked around, trying to make sense of this vision. I could hear voices murmuring around me, the sound of papers being shuffled, and the distinct feeling that I had stepped into a private meeting. My heart pounded as I took it all in, realizing I was seeing something I was never meant to see. As I stood there, still adjusting to the strangeness of the vision, my attention was drawn to a group of people gathered around a large table. At the head of it sat Donald Trump. I felt a strange mix of emotions seeing him there, the very person I'd actively opposed, surrounded by advisors and officials who seemed equally committed to what he was saying. They were in deep discussion, nodding thoughtfully and scribbling notes as he outlined plans for the nation. I strained to listen, surprised by the depth and seriousness of their conversation. The topics they discussed were far-reaching: economic strategies, international alliances, and plans for strengthening the nation's core values. It wasn't the image I had expected to see. There was a deliberateness in their conversation, a genuine concern for the future of America. They weren't just talking politics, they were laying out ideas they believed would shape the nation for generations. As I continued to listen, the conversation among the officials took a turn towards a topic that caught my attention and made my pulse quicken. They were discussing the future of marriage laws in America. Trump leaned forward, his expression grave as he addressed the group, revealing his deep concerns about the nation's direction. He emphasized the importance of shaping the future carefully, stating that a nation's strength begins with the foundation of strong families and traditions that have held society together for generations. There was a general murmur of agreement around the table. One of the officials, sitting to Trump's left, spoke passionately about the state of the nation, pointing out that people were struggling to find a solid belief system in an ever-changing world. He argued that the country had drifted from its roots, and the only way to restore stability was to go back to what had always been the foundation of American society, family. As they delved deeper into the discussion, it became clear that their first proposal was to restrict the legal recognition of same-sex marriages. They believed that by limiting marriage to traditional unions, they could realign the nation with what they saw as its core values, values that had kept the nation stable for generations. They weren't presenting this as an attack on rights, but rather as an effort to preserve the essence of what family means. One advisor explained that it wasn't about denying anyone's rights, but about asking what kind of future the nation was building by redefining such an essential institution. The focus was on restoring what they believed to be the foundational principles that had long sustained American society. It was clear that they felt deeply about this matter, not out of malice, but out of a desire to protect the integrity of the nation's moral framework. Another official added that any changes would take into account the existing legal rights of people in same-sex marriages, but moving forward, the policy would establish a standard that reflected what they considered the national heritage. Their objective, they revealed, was to create a future that could be rooted in values they believed to be timeless and universal. The group of officials listened intently, nodding in agreement. Their faces were serious, but their resolve was unwavering. As I observed, I found myself caught in a swirl of conflicting emotions. I didn't share their views, yet I couldn't ignore the genuine conviction they held. They weren't speaking from a place of hatred or disdain, rather, they were speaking from a place of deeply held belief in the importance of tradition, and they felt this change was necessary to preserve the nation's stability. As the meeting progressed, it became apparent that this plan was something they truly believed in, a plan that could potentially reshape the future of the country. The discussion took a new turn as the officials began to address another strategy. Trump's focus shifted, and he revealed the second phase of their plan, reducing government funding and support for LGBTQ organizations. It was a stark and strategic move, intended to cut back on resources that these groups relied on to operate and expand their influence. They believed that, by limiting financial support, they could curb what they saw as a misguided movement that, in their view, was reshaping society in ways they considered harmful. To them, these organizations promoted values they felt conflicted with the traditions and moral standards the country was founded on. Several officials in the room supported this idea, nodding as Trump outlined the rationale behind it. The consensus was that taxpayer dollars shouldn't fund programs that, in their eyes, promoted ideologies at odds with what they deemed core American values. One advisor pointed out that limiting government grants and subsidies to these organizations would likely decrease their ability to influence education, media, and community programs, thereby slowing down what they felt was an aggressive cultural shift. The discussion continued, with each person reinforcing the belief that this measure wasn't meant to target individuals, but rather to protect the nations by directing funds to causes they considered beneficial to society as a whole. I listened closely, struck by the collective conviction in the room. They truly believed that by pulling back on funding for these organizations, they could steer the nation in a direction they saw as more aligned with their principles. They spoke about reallocating funds toward initiatives that emphasized traditional family structures and promoted what they called universal values, believing that such efforts would resonate with a majority of Americans. It was a calculated decision, designed to reshape the landscape of social support and advocacy in America. There was no animosity in their words, just a firm belief that by limiting support for LGBTQ organizations, they could redirect the country's resources toward a vision they believed was in its best interest. I watched as they finalized this part of the plan, each official nodding in agreement, their faces set with resolve. The discussion shifted once more as Trump and his advisors moved to the third and final aspect of their agenda, implementing educational policies that would instill what they termed traditional values in the nation's schools. The plan was detailed, and the intent was clear: to reshape the foundation of American education by emphasizing teachings that they believed would uphold long-standing morals and reinforce the cultural heritage they valued. The officials revealed their intention to integrate new curriculum standards that would focus on topics like family structure, respect for authority, civic duty, and the history of foundational American principles. These changes, they believed, would bring back a sense of purpose and direction to students, guiding them toward values they considered fundamental for personal and societal success. They spoke of reintroducing teachings on what they described as universal truths about life and human nature, a curriculum that would highlight the virtues of self-discipline, loyalty, and commitment. This wasn't just about adding a few courses or adjusting lessons, it was a calculated plan to reshape the ethos of the school system itself, aiming to nurture a generation that would, in their eyes, appreciate and carry forward the nation's traditions. They believed that by reorienting the nation's educational content, they could help the youth reconnect with values they felt were eroding. To them, this wasn't about exclusion but about grounding young Americans in what they saw as the principles that would guide them toward a fulfilling, responsible life. The positive response from each advisor in the room was undeniable, as they saw this plan as not only possible but essential. In a sudden, disorienting flash, the vision faded. I blinked, and the familiar outlines of my own bedroom gradually took shape around me. I sat up, my heart still racing, trying to process the intense images and conversations I had overheard. As the shock wore off, a rush of conflicted feelings flooded my mind. On one hand, I still held my reservations about Trump, deep-rooted beliefs I'd felt strongly enough to campaign against. Yet, I couldn't ignore the sincerity and conviction I'd sensed in that room. Despite my personal objections, there was a weight to their discussions, an undeniable commitment to ideals they saw as essential for the nation's well-being. I thought back to the plans they discussed, each one touching on areas that, for them, were matters of national stability and moral integrity. Although I disagreed with some of their perspectives, a part of me was moved by their determination. They were convinced they were safeguarding something valuable, something they believed future generations needed. As I lay there in the quiet of my room, reflecting on everything I had witnessed and felt, my heart grew heavy with the weight of my thoughts. The events of the day, the choices I had made, and the vision that had unfolded before me all swirled in my mind, but there was one lingering feeling I couldn't ignore: compassion. I had always opposed the LGBTQ lifestyle, not out of hate, but because I believed it went against the natural order, against what I understood to be God's design. I had witnessed the discussions about the policies that could reshape the nation, and part of me remained firm in my stance. But as I thought about the people within the LGBTQ community, something stirred within me, a deep yearning for them to find healing, truth, and redemption. I realized that, while I might not agree with their lifestyle, I could still love them, as difficult as that might seem at times. After all, they were not the enemy. They were lost, searching for meaning and acceptance, just like so many others. I thought about the power of prayer, how it could open doors, soften hearts, and bring light to even the darkest places. And so, as I knelt beside my bed, my heart overwhelmed with a sense of urgency, I prayed, not out of condemnation, but out of love. Lord, I come to you with a heart full of compassion for those in the LGBTQ community. I know they face struggles and pain that many of us can't understand. I ask that you reach into their lives, that you show them the light of your love and truth. I pray that you reveal yourself to them in a way they cannot ignore, that you speak to their hearts and let them know how deeply you care for them. Father, your word tells us that we are all created in your image, and that you came to save everyone, no matter their past, no matter their struggles. Please, Lord, open their eyes to the truth of who you are and who they are meant to be in you. Guide them away from confusion and into the warmth of your embrace. I pray for their healing, for their redemption, and for their salvation. May they come to know your peace, your forgiveness, and your perfect love. May they see that they are not beyond redemption, that your grace is enough to cover every mistake, every choice, every brokenness. And Lord, may we as your people show them the same love and grace that you have shown us. Let us not be judges, but vessels of compassion and understanding,